Hey everybody, it's Bridget Murphy with Koru K9 Dog Training. We're back for another Trainer AMA with our very good friend and trainer Sierra out of DFW. So we're going to dive right in. I'm going to let Sierra introduce herself, and then we're going to tackle a very big hot topic in dog training, training tools. So first, actually, let me kick it over to my husband, Ray. If you guys don't remember him, he'll introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Ray Murphy, one of the co-founders of Koru K9. I'm excited to be here.
And Sierra, we'd love to hear about you and your experience with the training.
Hey y'all, I'm Sierra. I've been training for almost 8 years now. I got into training when I got my first working dog, who's now kind of slowing down, which is sad. But in between there, I've worked with a lot of great mentors. I've gone through the silver and gold NEPO post schools, and I honestly just love seeing the transformation of owners working with their dogs. That's like the coolest part to me. So I'm really excited for today just to kind of talk through some of like the big questions that most owners have when they start working with their dogs.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really key point, actually with this tool conversation. So what we want to talk about today is, every dog and owner are very different. Why we use these training tools, what they are, what they're not, how we, back up the tools with training and all that good stuff. So Sierra, let's talk a little bit about the use of training tools with dogs and how they differ, especially when talking about, different drives and motivators and breeds and all of that good stuff. So I'll kick it back over to you.
Okay, thanks. So I think the first thing that we have to talk about before we even really get into tools is like how different every single dog is going to be. So when I first start talking with a client, I think the biggest thing, or where the biggest hesitation lies with a lot of clients around tools, is that like my past dogs didn't need any of this. Like, why would I need to use this on my dog? I've been super successful with like the 3 or 4 dogs I've owned in the past, and they haven't needed any of that stuff. Well, we have to work the dog in front of us. And I feel like dogs have really changed temperamentally over the last, 20, 30 years, or at least like since I was a kid. Like growing up, all of my friends had dogs, and like we had family dogs. And I feel like none of those dogs, at least that I can remember, had any sort of behavioral problems. Like it's just so weird to see how much has changed in the past, 20 years or so from when I was a kid, like hanging out with all of my friends and their dogs. Like there was never a worry that a dog is going to like come attack me when I walk in the door or something like that. So I think a lot has shifted as far as dogs' temperaments go. And I think that really goes back to, breeding practices and where we're sourcing our dogs from. So I think that's the most important thing to start this conversation, is just having an understanding of the dog in front of you, their genetics, their temperament, and really what their needs are. Our world has also changed a lot. And I think from, 20 years ago or even 15 years ago, the expectation of dogs was very different. Like our dogs were house pets. They hung out at home. That's pretty much all we did with them. Like we would go for walks around the neighborhood, and, they'd be fine with people coming and going. But now it's like people expect to be able to take their dogs absolutely everywhere and do like all of these cool, fun things with their dogs, but they're not really understanding what their dog's needs are or necessarily how to start that training process. So I think it is really important to first talk about the genetics of the dog in front of you, the temperament of the dog in front of you, what motivates the dog in front of you. And so I think that conversation starts there with the client before we even touch on why do we think that tools may or may not be a good idea for that dog.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is, it's a really, really great point. Not only, genetic differences and all that, but just the fact, I think what a lot of dog owners don't realize is how dogs' brains are very different than ours. They communicate differently. You know, they see things in pictures and patterns and repetitions, and that's how they learn. And they communicate differently. And so what we're really getting at with these tools is we want to bridge the gap between the human and the canine language, right? Like we really need a way that we can effectively communicate with the dog in a way that's meaningful and beneficial to them. And I think a lot of owners, very well intentioned, don't realize that difference and maybe, you know, want to do things that feel good to them as a human versus what, like you were saying, what's beneficial for the dog. So,
Yeah, Sierra, really quick, where do you think a lot of this information is coming from, that the use of things like e-collars and prong collars and things like that are bad? Because it seems to be like a very large division in the methodology as far as training dogs. And then what's the purpose of all these different tools? You know, without going off the deep end scientifically, what is it your perception of the ones that are most commonly used in balanced dog training, and why?
Okay, so I think to Bridget's point, like these tools are simply used to communicate with your dog. So like prong collars and e-collars, I think, to answer your question, Ray, are going to be the most used in the balance training world. Prong collars, I feel like, get a horrible rap just because of what they look like. And people don't truly understand that a properly fitted and, you know, well-made prong collar is actually going to be more effective and a lot safer than like a flat collar or even a slip lead or like a martingale collar, because the way that the prong collar is designed is to distribute pressure evenly around the dog's entire neck, whereas those other tools are going to put, if your dog is pulling on them, they're going to put direct pressure on the dog's trachea, which can lead to that, like, you know, coughing and choking sound, or trachea collapse if your dog is pulling really hard. So the prong collar is going to be really the safest and most effective way, while also using very minimal pressure on your dog or muscle behind that correction if needed. But I think more importantly than the tool itself is teaching the behavior. Like these tools, yes, can be used as a band-aid in situations for dogs that are pulling or reactive and stuff like that, but that's not the way that we teach that first. Like before I ever put a prong collar on a dog, I'm teaching them a foundational communication system. I'm teaching them how to get pressure of a leash to go away. So dogs have a natural opposition reflex. So when they feel pressure, they want to go the opposite way, right? We want to teach them to come with the pressure. So we just start by pulling the dog towards us. As soon as they release that pressure by taking a step towards us, we feed them. We incorporate a lot of positive reinforcement in the beginning stages of our training when teaching behaviors. So before we put that prong collar on that dog and try to go for a walk with it, we're first teaching that pressure release system with a leash. And we're also teaching the desired behavior. I think people want to correct behaviors very quickly, but they're not always willing to teach the behavior that they're correcting. So like, let's say for instance, you know, you've got an 18-month-old German Shepherd who's just like dragging you down the street, like trying to, you know, get to every single person and dog it sees, or like squirrel crosses the road and it just takes off and drags you down the street with them. Like before we put a prong collar on, we first have to teach that dog where the heel position is. Like, what do you want them to do instead of pull? Where do we expect the dog to walk? And then work on adding in those distractions. Once we can hold the dog accountable for where to walk, because we've taught them that position, then we can hold the dog accountable with a tool. So there's a lot of prerequisites that come into the training process before we ever even introduce a tool.
And why wouldn't you be able to do the same thing with like a flat collar, for instance?
I mean, you can work on teaching a dog a proper heel position with a flat collar or a slip lead, which I do a lot. But those tools are not necessarily going to give you the most effective way of communicating what not to do in the situations. Once the dog understands what to do, they're not going to really give you a way of holding your dog accountable, at least very effectively. There are a lot of dogs who will respond to minimal amounts of pressure, like a flat collar or a martingale collar, which is fantastic. But then you have those dogs who are just like, want to go, go, go. And again, it really just depends on the dog in front of you. So not every single dog I work with wears a prong collar. I'm sending a dog home today that is just on a flat collar and an e-collar, which we haven't even gotten into yet. But every single dog that I work with is going to learn differently and is going to respond differently to tools. So a slip lead may be perfect for, you know, the dog I'm working with today, but a dog I meet tomorrow may completely blow through that pressure and need something a little bit more that gives their owner more confidence in those specific situations that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
those-
I mean, I've explained this to some clients as, when a prong correction or an e-collar correction has the ability to break an escalation. So when I say escalation, when the dog is doing something outside of his quote job, what you've taught him his job, meaning heel means stay by my side in this little bubble with a loose leash. You're not sniffing the ground. You're not staring it down, dogs or other people out there. You're paying attention to me until I give you a release command where you're free to go sniff, pee, poop, greet somebody, or do whatever. But if you go outside of that boundaries, I need to be able to get your attention back. And a prong correction or e-collar correction is like me poking you in the shoulder and saying, hey, pay attention here. By doing any kind of tugging or pulling on a harness or flat collar, you activate that opposition reflex. And inevitably, you actually teach the dog to do the opposite, which is go forward to the thing you're trying to get them away from. So I think the reason those are so popular in balanced dog training is because we have to have consequence built into our reward system and everything else. And without that, your commands become suggestions and not commands. And this is why we want to get away from that.
Yeah, I think those are all really great points. And Sierra, I think you hit on some really good ones that I think, if a dog owner was to go out there and search for tools or balanced training, a lot of the misinformation that's out there is that we're just slapping these tools on dogs, that we're, hurting them with a prong collar or blasting them with an e-collar or the shock collar. That is the very last thing that any of us want to do to our dogs. I mean, I use these tools on my own dogs. If people have been watching our videos, have said many times, I love my dogs more than anything in this world. I would never do anything to hurt them. So I really want to hit home that we are using these tools in a very fair, safe, and effective way, and we're training the dog what they mean. These aren't designed to harm or hurt. These are designed to help communicate in a way that is safe. One common tool that's out there, and I'm not saying it's a bad one, but a head halty or a head harness is a very popular tool in the positive only community, when really that's one that, you're physically yanking the dog's head around, and that can, when not used properly, like any tool, can cause harm. So yeah, I just really wanted to hit home those really key things that you talked about. What we were kind of gearing towards too is e-collar work. So I'd love to talk a little bit, because it's my favorite tool. I think a properly used e-collar is phenomenal. It's so, multidimensional with what you can do with it. So I would love to kind of talk to people about what you do, Sierra, as far as like pre-work with the e-collar, and then kind of diving into how you introduce it and your methodology.
Okay, awesome. I agree with you. The e-collar is definitely one of my favorite tools as well when it comes to training, because when properly conditioned, it gives your dog so much freedom. I'm going to tell a quick story and then I'll kind of dive into my methodologies and stuff like that. So I've been working with a dog for the last, 6 or 7 months, and his owners have had a few dogs prior to him, and they were working with a trainer with their current dog, who just really misused an e-collar. One of their main goals with their dog was to have him be neutral around their horses so they could go for trail rides with the dog and the horses, and, you know, everyone can live peacefully and get along great. Well, their dog was trying to like nip at all of the horses anytime they would like pick up from a walk to a canter. So they hired this trainer who just threw an e-collar on this dog, had no prior experience with an e-collar, no understanding of how to get that pressure to go away, and just literally let this dog loose in a big arena with 2 or 3 horses and just started frying him with the e-collar. Anytime he would run towards a horse, would just start pressing buttons on the e-collar, and like this dog was just freaking out, like crying, didn't understand what he was doing wrong because he had no idea why he was feeling this pressure, and at such a high level, like he was just getting completely shut down. Like a lot of times, and I've worked with a lot of dogs that have gone through a similar experience as this dog with an e-collar, because unfortunately there are a lot of trainers out there who just don't understand that it has to be done in a very different way than that. So needless to say, these clients were extremely off-put by the e-collar, and when they started working with me, that was one of their very first questions, was like, if you use an e-collar, you know, how do you use it? We have had really bad experiences with it. Like, what can we do without it? So we worked for a couple of months without it, and I was like kind of slowly trying to convince them, and finally I convinced them to just feel it. So we got them to feel it, and they, you know, I go through the levels like 1, 2, you know, a couple at a time, and they're like, I'm not feeling it. Like, is it turned on? And I'm like, that's the whole point of doing this. Like, the whole point is that this is such a low level stimulation. It's a TENS unit. So it's just a muscle stimulation. It's like something that you would feel when you go to the chiropractor or physical therapy, like the little patches that they put on your back or your shoulders when you need, you know, some work on your muscles, like to help you feel better. So the e-collar is really just a TENS unit. So it's this very, very small muscle stimulation. And I always have my clients feel the e-collar because it generally changes their understanding and changes their mind of using it on their dog. So once they felt it, you know, the owners are like, seriously, like that's what it feels like. And I'm like, yes, like, I hope you get it now. It was a really cool thing to see their whole mind change around it based on what they were feeling. So I was like, okay, we already passed the levels that we'll probably be working with on your dog, and you couldn't even feel them. So let's go ahead and put this on your dog, and I'm going to show you how we find their working levels. So I'm, you know, working with their dog. Their dog ended up working on a level 4 out of 100 on a mini educator, and they couldn't feel the e-collar until it was on like an 18. So they were convinced after that point, and they were like, oh, he literally just looks like he's doing obedience. Like, he's so happy. Every single time I asked him to do something, his tail was wagging. And I'm like, that's because it was introduced properly. And he's starting to understand that stim equals food, and that's releasing dopamine in his brain. So going back to methodologies now. So now that we've convinced them, let's talk about the different ways of using the e-collar. So I always explain, I have kind of 2 major ways of using the e-collar. And I always explain it like the gas pedal and the brake pedal in your vehicle. So the gas pedal, when you press it, speeds up your car, gets you to where you need to go more quickly, right? So we can use the e-collar like a gas pedal to get your dog into known behaviors more quickly. Or you can use the e-collar like the brake pedal in your car, where when you press it, the car stops, right? So you can use the e-collar to get your dog into behavior or stop behaviors. The way that I teach the e-collar is through that gas pedal method first. So I want your dog to first understand how to get that feeling to go away, which is through compliance of known behavior. So before ever putting the e-collar on your dog, I'm first teaching them how to understand how to get pressure to go away. And I do that with just a slip lead or a prong collar, depending on, the dog's needs and sensitivity levels. So I'm teaching them, like, when I pull up on the leash, their butt has to hit the ground and go into a sit. Or when I pull down on the leash, I want them to lay down. Or if I pull the leash towards me, I want them to come to me. And their behavior or their, position is what is going to make that pressure go away. I then teach or layer in the verbal command. So the leash pressure part, I'm not saying anything to the dog. I'm just teaching them to follow that pressure. Then I layer in verbal commands. Once they understand those two things, then I'll layer in the stim of the e-collar. And the concept is the exact same as the leash pressure. We're teaching their dog how to get that little tiny tingly feeling, like it feels like fleas crawling around on their neck, how to get that feeling to go away. And it's really cool to see that transition in the dog's brain of like, okay, what is happening right now? And how do I get this weird thing to go away? And then you start seeing them go into behavior so much more quickly. And it just clicks. There's like a light bulb moment where you can literally see these dogs thinking and processing this information in the moment that they're feeling the e-collar. And they're like, okay, this is really starting to make sense. I have a dog right now who came to me with a long list of bites. He has bitten every single member of his family on more than one occasion. He's like 100-pound Doberman. He had absolutely zero structure in the household. I think he's 4 years old. But they had previously tried sending this dog to another training company. And they ended up sending him home, I think after like day 4, because he wouldn't eat and he was just like lacking motivation. He was super shut down. So it took a lot for them to want to send their dog away again, understandably. They were very emotional about it, but they knew they had to do something in order to keep this dog, because at this point, he's just a liability to anybody coming into their house, including them. Like, all of them were getting kind of scared of him because they would like touch him on the couch and he would start barking and lunging at them, like trying to attack them. And I'm just like, okay. So I was like, first of all, I promise I'm not going to send your dog home. I think I've sent one dog home and it was because of a medical issue, not a training issue. And so this dog took like 2 weeks to really settle in and like want to work for me, which is fine. That's not the longest that I've had a dog take to settle in, but it took him a good 2 weeks. We first started implementing structure, once he started to kind of get the hang of that, we introduced leash pressure, and now we're at the end of week 5 with him, and he is like a superstar on the e-collar. This dog came to me, like, wouldn't even look at me, just like cowering all of the time, like didn't want to come out of his kennel. And now we're to the point where like I can literally take him into like Home Depot and Atwoods and he knows exactly what to do with the help of all of these training tools. So I think, Ray, you have a question?
Yeah, just to dovetail off what you're saying there, I mean, we get a lot of people who come to us who've been to other trainers or training companies, because it's very easy for anyone to put all sorts of flashy videos and have a really nice website. If you were a new dog owner, what are the type of questions you would ask a balanced dog trainer on if they said they want to use a prong collar, e-collar, or both? What kind of questions, if you didn't know anything, you just your first dog, what kind of questions would you ask that trainer? First of all, why does my dog need this? And how are you going to show them? What are the red flags to be looking for on that response?
So I think, when you're talking to a trainer about introducing tools or why your dog needs them, red flags, like if you go into that initial session with that trainer and they have spent absolutely zero time getting to know you or your dog or how you live with your dog, and they immediately want to put a tool on your dog and start using it in that first session, which happens so frequently. I think that is a huge red flag. Like I have said a couple other times today, like there are prerequisites to using these tools. And I think those are so important for, not only trainers to understand, but clients to understand. Like, yes, I know these behaviors, especially when we're working with behavior modification, which is the majority of what I do and what we do as a company with Koru. I understand that the behaviors that the client is experiencing are extremely frustrating, and a lot of them are extremely unsafe. But we can't just throw a tool on a dog and expect it to understand what it means. So I think if the trainer is either unwilling to explain the process and methodology behind using that tool and why it is important to take it slowly to teach the dogs the proper communication before using the tool, that's a huge red flag. I have clients who are like, just give me something so I can, take my dog on a walk. I'm like, well, your dog's not ready to go on a walk. Like, we have to minimize the opportunities for your dog to reinforce these undesirable behaviors before we can put them back in that position. Like, you don't want to set your dog up to continuously fail, because then it's more difficult to get that dog to choose a different behavior in that setting, right? So we have to first teach them all of these things that we want them to do in order to hold them accountable for what we don't want them to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot involved, especially with e-collars. When somebody's used e-collar previously and they tell me it didn't work for them.
Yeah.
So initially, those questions right away, I'm going to ask, okay, first off, what did you use?
Yeah.
I want to know, did you use a professional e-collar? Did it have at least 100 levels on it? Number two, what's the dog's baseline? Meaning, what's the lowest level that dog even indicated he felt anything? Do you know what that is? If they can't answer that, okay, what was your dog's working range? And they look at you like you have three heads. If they don't know what a working range is, no, the trainer told me to use it at a 20. It doesn't work like that. There's 100 levels on the e-collar for a reason. And you just asking a few simple questions, exactly the type of trainer that introduced that. It was somebody who's way out of their depth using the thing. If the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So I think those are some of the quick questions that I would throw out there to anybody who's kind of unsure about e-collar use, right? Bridget, you had something to say?
Yeah, I think both of you guys brought up some really good points that I just wanted to recap for people. The superstitious behaviors that can be created by inappropriate e-collar usage. I have seen this so often. I actually, anybody watching the videos that we put out recently knows that part of how Ray and I started Koru K9 Dog Training was because we worked with trainers that were doing things the wrong way. I personally worked with a trainer who put an e-collar on my dog and blasted it at a very high level to get my dog to come back when my dog didn't know recall. And she created incredibly superstitious behaviors to pine cones. And so when I heard the story about the client dog that you'd work with, Sierra, about blasting this dog around horses, it's going to create a superstitious behavior. That's not training. So I want to be really clear that clients understand the difference on how these tools can be used inappropriately and then appropriately. When we use an e-collar appropriately, we call it negative reinforcement. And I bring this up because people hear, positive reinforcement or, punishment in training. Really, I want to hit home the fact that reinforcement is designed to strengthen behaviors. And so when we use the e-collar like Sierra was talking about, we're using it like an alarm clock. So people who, set your phone to wake up in the morning and you hear that, meh, 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 and you get out of bed. Or maybe you get out of bed sooner because you don't want to hear that annoying noise. That is low-level e-collar usage. That is negative reinforcement. You're getting out of bed sooner, which is your phone just increased that behavior. So that's exactly how we use Ecollar. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that for people if they have questions about how we're different in how we use Ecollars versus the superstitious behavior creation. But I know you had another story, Sierra, about Walter. Did you want to kind of dive into Walter's story a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Walter, he's a 2.5-year-old pit bull that was found chained up at a lake. And he came, this guy found him at the lake, and he had a chain literally embedded in his neck. So if you can just kind of imagine his story prior to those moments of being found, obviously it's speculation, but you kind of know something pretty bad happened to this dog prior to his current owner finding him. And his owners are so incredibly dedicated. I love them as clients. Like, they have poured so much of themselves into this dog and changing his life. And it's amazing to see where he started versus where he's at now. And I can always appreciate when clients just put so much of themselves into their dog and they just want what's best for their dog. So with Walter, he came to me for a 6-week board and train after having worked with 3 other training companies. So they had worked with other training companies. I believe all of them were positive reinforcement only companies. So they did not believe in, using any type of tool or negative reinforcement on the dog. And they were struggling so hard with this dog, but they just knew that he could live a better life. So they had a fairly decent foundation with the dog. Like, he understood basic commands. He did have a pretty decent, settle command, but it wasn't reliable. Like, if someone came into their house, he would bark, 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 and kind of lunge at people initially, and then it would take them, a couple minutes to settle him down and get him to lay down with them. But then as soon as that person moved, it was right back to barking, lunging, all of this crazy behavior. So they knew they needed to do something else. He was barking and lunging at dogs. They live in Austin. So they live downtown Austin. They can't even take their dog for a walk because they're going to pass people. They're going to pass other dogs. There's nowhere they could take this dog, without driving somewhere where they're not going to be in front of all of his triggers. So they sent him to us for 6 weeks, and the first 3 weeks of this dog's program, he was so shut down and scared. He would hide in the back of his crate. As soon as he came out of the crate, I would have to pull him out of the crate and make him come out just to show him that I'm not going to hurt you. But you can't stay in your crate for 3 weeks either. I have to show you that I'm not going to hurt you. So over and over, 6, 7 times a day, just getting this dog out and trying to get him to take food. I would, just let him roam around my training space and just throw food to him. And slowly, he started to trust me, and we started to build a really good relationship through positive reinforcement, which was kind of already there for him. He understood that. Once he started to open up to me and he was coming out of his kennel easily for me, we were able to get the muzzle off. The whole first 3 weeks, he wanted to kill me. If I was reaching in his crate to put his leash on, I ended up having to put a leash on a chuck-it stick and put the chuck-it stick in his crate and leash him up that way, because if I put my hands in there, it was just barking, growling, lunging. He was terrified. And this dog I would never label as human aggressive. This dog was just so scared. Kind of deservedly so, if you go back to, how he was found and the conditions he was in. So, we slowly started building trust. And once I started using teaching him leash pressure and how to understand all of these things, I had a way of holding him accountable for the behaviors that I was asking him to do. And seeing him go from so shut down and so fearful to having confidence in the behaviors that I was asking him to do was like the most amazing thing you can see a dog do. He knows exactly what to do now in situations when he sees another dog or sees a person. If somebody comes into the owner's home, they can tell him to go to his place command, and he's like, this is my safe zone. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do here, and I don't have to do anything other than lay here, and my owners are going to just bring me food. Like, having that understanding of what he has to do, because he does have to do it. It's not an option anymore. Before he had, tools and was able to be held accountable for behaviors, everything his owners asked him was an option, but it's not an option anymore. And that has built so much confidence in his brain because we have been able to show him all of these different pictures of these scary moments and show him that he's actually not gonna die. Like, this is actually okay for him to be a part of. And prior to us having a way of holding him accountable for the behaviors we wanted, every situation that he thought was uncomfortable, like, those were moments in his brain. Like, if you think of a dog's brain as like a photo album, they save all of these snapshots of moments of their life that have meaning to them. And when they're put back in that situation, they flip back into that photo album in their brain, and they're like, okay, person walked through the front door, I barked my head off and lunged and growled, and then they left. The situation ended. So that must be what I need to continue to do to make that situation end for myself. So now that we have ways of having him, be held accountable for desired behaviors, we offered him an alternative good behavior in that situation. We can now tell him to go lay down on his bed. His owners don't have to lock him in a bedroom upstairs away from everybody. He can be a part of everything safely because he knows exactly what to do. So those types of situations where you're working with dogs, or you own a dog that seems so far gone or scared about everything and shut down or aggressive or even has a bite history, like, there is hope. And I think Walter's story is definitely one of those where if he didn't have as dedicated of an owner as he does, like, that's a dog that would have, easily ended up in a shelter and probably euthanized because of his behavior. And nobody took the time to understand this dog, or wouldn't have taken the time to understand this dog and really show him how to live a very calm and peaceful life with his owners. So it's opened up a lot of freedom for them. And now they can, enjoy walks downtown Austin and not have to worry about their dog, like, attacking people that they walk by. So the freedom that they have with this dog is amazing now.
So you brought up a good point, and something that I really want to drive home is these tools in general are made for us to have a better communication gap, reduce that gap between us and the dog. And also, ultimately, by doing that, you keep the dog safe. When I ask the owners, will your dog come back to you when you call him? They tell, well, 95% of the time he will. Okay, well, when do you need him? It's at 5 that he's chasing a squirrel into the road, or he's going after some kind of bear in the woods. You know what I mean? It's just, those are the type of things that people don't really understand. And then you mentioned euthanasia. So when we're talking about trainers that get out of their depth, when you realize that the positive only or relationship based only thing, when you're dealing with behavior modification, especially with serious behaviors, with dogs biting people or lunging or doing all those things, when they don't have a way to extinguish that behavior, their next move is to recommend euthanasia. So dogs are getting put down needlessly by things that we can fix literally over the course of a week or two. or at least get a handle on it to the point that it's manageable for the owners. And then again, just give them a foothold into actually fixing that communication gap. This topic could literally go on for about 8 hours, and we definitely want to have you back on again to go deeper into this. And I know Bridget wants to add to this thing too also before I let it go. But before we let you off the hook, and I'll let Bridget ask her question first, but I'll let this brew in your brain for a second. Is Damien on our last AMA brought up, what's a good thing to ask a potential trainer? And he said, ask them why. Why did they get into dog training? Why are they doing this? And I think that's a very important thing to get from somebody, is their motivation, and to why they do it, because it really gives them a deeper insight as to, are you going to be a good fit for us, right? I mean, because it's a partnership. You have to transfer that knowledge to me as the owner to continue on. So before I let you answer that, I'll have Bridget ask her question so I don't leave her in the dirt here.
No, I loved what you were saying, Sierra, about what we are doing is helping owners and their dogs have a better relationship through communication, through boundaries, through structure, through, like you said, showing Walter exactly what we need him to do, that his owners have situations covered, that they're there to keep him safe. It's a very beautiful thing. And it's so unfortunate to me that these tools get vilified, because Walter's a prime example. His life was saved through proper balance training. And my own dog, Luna, I've talked about her many a times. I think in the wrong hands, she would have been put down. So I really want people to hear that we are establishing trust and a beautiful relationship through proper communication with these tools. And we're teaching dogs what to do, what not to do, all that good stuff. But yeah, before I go on and on, I would love to hear your why, Sarah. So.
Okay, so before I say that, Ray, you brought up, does your dog recall and the whole bear in the woods? So the dog Jester that I was talking about, the owners that didn't want to use the e-collar because of the horse situation. Well, their dog is now on an e-collar and they use it religiously. I got a text from their owner a couple of weeks ago, literally saying that the e-collar and his recall saved his life. They have a bunch of property out in Montana, and their favorite thing to do with their dog is go on ATV rides and just let their dog run. He's a shepherd. He goes full speed next to the ATV, and it's the coolest thing ever. He got on a trail of some sort of wild animal and he took off. His owner, chased after him as fast as he could, and he found him at the base of a tree barking at a bear. And he was able to use his e-collar and recall his dog away from that bear. And I'm going to get emotional because I love that dog. But it's just these tools literally can save lives. And I've seen it happen more than once. And since that moment, he has had another run-in with a bear and a run-in with deer and wolves. They live on a bunch of property out there. So it's really cool that they are now true believers in the e-collar. And his owner texted me a screenshot of the message he sent out to his family and was like, I don't know how much all of this training costed us, but it literally saved our dog's life. And they have a bunch of kids that he was do anything she says. You guys all have dogs, use her as your trainer, because whatever she does, literally worked magic and saved our dog's life. So I just wanted to throw that in there because you had mentioned bears, and that's just a cool thing that it actually happened. But thankfully, he had the communication and ability to recall off of that situation. Whereas many, many other dogs, that situation would have ended with, the dog's life would have ended in that moment for sure. So anyways, sorry for crying. But so I think to answer your question now, Ray, about my why, it's that. It's that story. those moments of like when an owner has previously failed in those situations and then seeing their dog be able to come back and do that exact scenario and recall flawlessly, or walk by a group of dogs that they normally would have, freaked out on or gotten aggressive with, or have that person come over to their house and their dog just be able to, lay on their place cot or their dog bed calmly and not try to attack that person coming into their home. Like, that's my why. Like, the owners and teaching them how to live cohesively and peacefully with their dog that they have been told, to put down or rehome. Like, all of these people that I work with, like 99% of the people I work with have all been told their dog is, untrainable, or they should just get rid of it or euthanize it because it doesn't have a chance. Like, these dogs with proper communication can make such huge turnarounds, and we can make such a huge difference in not only the dog's life, but the owner's life. Like, the majority of the clients I worked with are at their wits' end with their dog most of the time, and they don't know what to do. And it's hard to do anything when you don't know where to start. But having somebody come in and help you, if you're willing to follow instructions and do what your trainer is telling you to do, like, there will be a huge change in not only your life, but your dog's life. And the whole point of this, and I think the whole point of balanced training, is just allowing you to have more freedom with your dog. And that's why I do this. And that's why I love doing this, because I want you to be able to take your dog on an ATV ride on, hundreds of acres and let your dog run free and see them do what they love the most. So those are the things that I want my clients to be able to do. Like, just live their best life with their dogs and see their dogs do the most that they could possibly do. Like, we don't want to see your dog living in a box and never being put in any sort of situation that triggers them. So that's why I do this.
I think it was beautifully put. I love that because, a lot of times when we're writing up stuff for our website and whatever, I literally use the term change your life and your or transform your life and your dog. And it's not just, ad copy or marketing lingo. I mean, it's true. And like you said, we're changing people's lives and their dogs' lives. We're keeping dogs alive. And so I think what you said is just absolutely beautiful. And thank you for what you do. And thank you for being part of Koru. I mean, it's an honor for us to be able to work with trainers like you. So it's amazing. I think we touched on a lot of really, really good topics. We threw a lot in here in a very short amount of time. So please know that we will further expand on this. Sierra is going to definitely be on again. There's a lot of other topics we want to chat about. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this talk about training tools. If you have any questions about tools, we are here to help you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us on our website, KoruK9.com. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of the platforms at KoruK9.com. You can call us or email us at woof@KoruK9.com. We are here to help you. So I hope you enjoyed this session, and we'll see you again very soon.